When I got home that evening, the light from the street lamps reflected off the front windows of the Crawford house. The restoration was taking longer than I'd planned, but it was finally starting to look like a place someone could live in again. I left my bag on the kitchen counter, slipped off my shoes, and poured myself a glass of wine. The air smelled faintly of paint and old wood. I sat on the couch, leaned back, and scrolled through my phone, trying to let the day fade out. For months, every spare hour had gone into repairing the house, fixing cracked walls, repainting ceilings, choosing tiles that matched the original floor. It was exhausting, but I liked seeing progress, brick by brick. Sometimes I imagined how it would feel when it was finally done, quiet, steady, mine. No one asking for help, no one judging what I should be doing with my time. I opened Instagram just to distract myself. That's when the image hit me first, the white dress, the bright smile, the backdrop of roses. Chloe stood between Ryan and a row of bridesmaids in pale pink. For a moment, I thought it was one of those bridal ads she sometimes modeled for. Then I saw the caption, "Can't believe I'm finally Mrs. Hayes." My stomach tightened. I reread it twice. The post had hundreds of comments, people congratulating her, calling the ceremony beautiful. I scrolled through the photos. There were my parents, standing behind her, smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. I froze. The date on the post said Saturday. That was 2 days ago. I didn't even know she was getting married that weekend. For a while, I just stared at the screen. My first thought was maybe there had been a last-minute decision, or maybe the photos were from some small shoot, not an actual ceremony. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. This was real. She'd gotten married, and no one had told me. Not even a message, not a single word. I set the phone down and tried to breathe. The room felt heavy, like the air had thickened. After a few minutes, I picked the phone back up and scrolled again, hoping to see something, anything, that would make it make sense. I checked my messages, my emails, my calls. Nothing from Chloe, nothing from my parents, just silence. I called my mom. It rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hi, honey," she said, like everything was normal. "Mom," I said slowly, "did Chloe get married?" There was a pause. "Oh, you saw the pictures. So it's true?" I asked. She sighed. "Yes. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends." I could hear clinking dishes in the background, like she was trying to keep herself busy. "Family?" I repeated. "I'm family." "I know, sweetheart," she said quickly. It wasn't personal. Chloe wanted it that way. She thought it would be simpler, less pressure. "Less pressure for who?" I asked. "You didn't think maybe I'd want to know my sister was getting married?" Her voice tightened a little. "Lauren, you've been busy with that house and everything. We didn't want to add stress. It was all very last minute." "That's not true," I said. "There's a photographer, a venue, flowers. That doesn't happen overnight." She didn't answer right away. "It wasn't my decision," she finally said. "Chloe didn't feel comfortable inviting you after everything that happened. She thought it might be awkward." I felt heat rise in my chest. "After everything that happened?" I repeated. "You mean me helping her pay her credit card debt? Or me being the one who talked to Ryan when he was threatening to leave?" "Lauren," she said quietly, "don't start. It's done now. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I let out a dry laugh. "You mean harder for you?" There was another pause, longer this time. "I think you should take some time," she said. "Chloe needs space to start her new life. You have your projects, your house, maybe it's time you focused on yourself." I wanted to say more, to shout, but all that came out was, "Got it." I ended the call before she could say anything else. For a long time, I sat there, staring at the half-finished wall across from me. The paint roller leaned against the baseboard where I'd left it that morning. Everything suddenly felt pointless. I'd spent years holding that family together, calls at midnight, money transfers, explanations, apologies, and now, when it really mattered, I wasn't even worth an invitation. I finished my wine, turned off the lights, and went upstairs. In the mirror, my face looked tired, older somehow. I thought about Chloe's smile in that photo, perfect, radiant, untouched by everything that came before. Maybe that was what she wanted, a new start without me in it. Before going to bed, I picked up my phone again. One new message. It was from Aunt Linda. *You probably saw the pictures. Don't take it to heart, sweetie. It's better this way. Asterisk. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. For the first time in years, I didn't reply. I drove through the late afternoon traffic in Portland, my hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. The city seemed quieter than usual, almost as if it knew the tension I carried inside. 4 days had passed since I'd stumbled across Chloe's wedding photos online. 4 days of scrolling through messages I wasn't meant to see, of unanswered texts, and of mounting disbelief that my own family had chosen to leave me out. The streets blurred past my windshield as I rehearsed what I would say to my parents. There was anger in me, yes, but also a strange resolve that I had never felt before. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. I was going to demand clarity. Pulling into the driveway of their old Victorian, I noticed how the afternoon sun cut across the gingerbread trim and cast long shadows over the porch. Memories hit me unbidden, my sister at 10, breaking grandma's vase, me taking the blame. At 17, sneaking out and me covering for her. And the scholarship at 16, which had been received with a dismissive, "Of course you got it. You're the responsible one." Every memory seemed to converge as I got out of the car. My pulse quickened as I walked up the steps and through the screen door, which creaked under my weight, a familiar sound that now felt oppressive. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee, my mother's comforting armor, I supposed. She stood by the counter, hands folded neatly, a smile arranged to look like concern. "Lauren," she said, voice measured, "I was just about to call you." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I studied her face, the careful control in her eyes, the slight tilt of her head, the practiced calm that always preceded lectures. I wanted answers, not reassurances. "I want to know why I wasn't invited to Chloe's wedding," I said, letting the words hang in the warm kitchen air. Her smile wavered for a split second before reforming. "Oh, honey, it's complicated. You've been so busy with your work," she trailed off, the excuse dangling. I cut her off sharply. "Busy with my career is not a reason to be excluded." She busied herself with pouring coffee, avoiding my gaze. "Chloe was worried you might not approve of Ryan. You can be intimidating." Intimidating because I asked questions? I swallowed my rising irritation, holding my voice steady. "Ryan thinks family is important," she added, setting 2 mugs on the counter, trembling slightly. I wanted to throw the mugs across the room. Instead, I stood there, letting the silence do the work for me. Before she could speak again, the garage door opened, and my father shuffled in. His eyes avoided mine, fixed instead on the floorboards he had always loved to work on. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he muttered. "Harder for whom?" I asked, stepping closer, voice rising. "For Chloe? For Ryan? For you two who always make excuses for her?" My mother's eyes glistened, as if she had practiced this kind of hurt before. "You've always been the responsible one," she said softly. "The responsible one who fixes things, keeps the family afloat." My fists clenched at my sides. Every word reminded me of every loan co-signed, every midnight call, every babysitting duty I had fulfilled for her convenience. And for what? This exclusion. I couldn't stay inside the same energy any longer. I turned toward the door. "I'm leaving," I said simply. "If Chloe wants a perfect wedding, she can have it without me." My words felt alien and yet liberating. My parents froze, their faces painted with confusion, as if they couldn't process that I was no longer willing to absorb the family's mistakes. I walked past them, leaving the kitchen and the house behind. Outside, the air smelled faintly of rain from earlier in the day, the Portland sky dimming to a muted gray. I didn't look back. The weight I had carried for decades, the constant patching, the endless mediation, the ceaseless role of the family fixer, suddenly felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't running to mend broken pieces that weren't mine to fix. My car door closed with a decisive thud, and I drove away without hesitation. Traffic moved slower now, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the calm certainty that I was choosing my own boundaries. No more sacrifices that erased me. No more cleaning up after Chloe's life choices. I would let her and Ryan live their story without my intervention. And just like that, leaving the house behind, a strange relief settled over me. The roads ahead were mine, and I intended to keep them that way. I found myself sliding into the familiar corner booth at my favorite cafe in Seattle. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, scattering across the wooden tables and casting long, warm stripes on the floor. Megan was already there, laptop open, takeout containers neatly stacked beside her, the faint aroma of spicy noodles and sweet Thai sauce drifting toward me as I approached. She looked up from her screen with a small, serious smile, the kind that made me realize she had something important to show me. "Sit down," she said quietly, nudging a stack of printed photos toward me. I hesitated for a moment, then picked them up with care, flipping through each one slowly. The first photo showed Ryan, Chloe's fiancé, leaning close to another woman in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. Another image showed them laughing together, heads almost touching, his hand resting where it clearly shouldn't be. My chest tightened, a reflexive pang of anger and disappointment, but unlike before, I didn't feel the immediate urge to act. I just stared at the images, letting the evidence settle into my mind. Megan watched me carefully, her eyes reflecting concern. "I thought you should see this," she said softly. Her tone wasn't accusatory, just matter of fact, and I appreciated that. I nodded, holding the photos in my hands a moment longer before setting them down on the table. The instinct that always made me want to fix Chloe's mistakes, to jump in and prevent disaster, felt absent. I realized, almost with a strange sense of relief, that this time I didn't have to intervene. "I see it," I whispered, my voice steadier than I expected. The memories of the past years flashed through my mind, the late nights covering for Chloe's mistakes, the hours spent helping her navigate problems she created, the money I had loaned and the debts I had quietly absorbed. Normally, I would have immediately planned a way to save her from herself, but now, for the first time, I didn't feel that pressure. I wasn't going to fix this. Not today. Megan leaned back, exhaling slowly, as if she too were letting go of some tension she had been holding. "You're sure?" she asked, eyebrows raised, glancing at me with the kind of disbelief that suggested she knew me well enough to know this wasn't my usual approach. I nodded, tracing the rim of my coffee cup with a finger. "I've spent my life keeping everyone afloat," I admitted quietly, "and not anymore. This time, I'm choosing peace over being the fixer." Her expression softened, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Finally setting boundaries," she said. "It's about time." I gave a brief, almost imperceptible nod, letting the words sink in for both of us. The cafe around us buzzed with its usual afternoon rhythm, cups clinking, low conversations drifting from table to table, but I felt strangely detached, almost calm. Not numb, not indifferent, just free from the pull that always dragged me into everyone else's messes. I wrapped my hands around my latte, feeling the warmth seep into my palms and ground me in the moment. I let myself breathe, taking in the sounds and smells of the cafe, the muted hum of life continuing around me while I sat there, quietly detached from the drama that had dominated so many years of my life. For the first time in a long while, I realized I could observe without absorbing, respond without fixing, and care without taking responsibility for someone else's choices. We sat in silence for a few moments, letting the reality of what I had decided settle. Megan reached for her fork, twirling noodles slowly before speaking again. "It's going to feel strange at first, isn't it?" she asked gently. I nodded, acknowledging the truth of her observation. "It does. But it's necessary," I said. "I've spent decades trying to rescue Chloe from herself, paying for her mistakes in every possible way. This time, I'm done. My energy, my focus, it's for me now." Megan's eyes met mine, understanding clear in her expression. "Good," she said simply, "because you've earned the right to step back. You've carried everyone else's weight for too long." I let out a soft laugh, though it felt hollow at first, then gradually steadied. "Too long," I agreed, the phrase carrying the weight of years of sacrifice and unrecognized effort. I leaned back against the booth, sipping my coffee, feeling the calm that came from knowing I had made a conscious choice, one that was not easy, but was mine to make. As we finished our meal, I looked out the window at the Seattle streets, rain beginning to blur the lights outside, reflections dancing on the wet pavement. I didn't need to check social media, didn't need to confront Chloe or Ryan tonight. For once, I was stepping away, allowing life to unfold without my intervention. That quiet decision, small yet monumental, marked a turning point in how I approached my family and the responsibilities I had long assumed were mine to bear. I sat in my Seattle apartment, the late morning sun spilling weakly across my hardwood floors. My hands were curled around a mug of black coffee, but the warmth barely reached me. My phone vibrated insistently on the counter, notifications flooding the screen, but I ignored them at first. Then, a video popped up on Instagram and my chest tightened instantly. I tapped it open. There was Chloe, radiant in her wedding dress, the soft lace catching the overhead light, the bustle of the Ridgewood estate around her. And then Ryan's hand swung sharply, catching her cheek with a loud crack that echoed even through my phone's small speaker. Gasps rippled through the crowd, people scattering, some filming, others frozen in disbelief. Chloe's hands rose to her face, mascara streaked, mouth open in a silent scream. The camera wobbled in the filmer's grasp, the whole scene jerky and horrifying. I pressed my palm to my mouth, unable to look away, heart hammering. Part of me wanted to drop everything, rush across the city, make it right. But another part, the one I had spent years nurturing, stayed firmly in place. I had spent decades absorbing crises, cleaning up other people's messes, paying off debts that weren't mine, smoothing over heartbreaks that belonged to everyone else. But not this time. The phone rang before I could catch my breath, and I almost didn't answer. When I saw it was my mother, the urge to pick it up nearly overwhelmed me. I let it ring once, twice, my finger hovering. Finally, I pressed it, lifting the receiver. Deborah, her voice cracked instantly, trembling in the way it always did when she was balancing panic and restraint. Your sister, she's hurt. You need to come. I closed my eyes, letting the memory of the countless crises I had intervened in wash over me. The late-night calls, the hospital visits, the forgotten checks, the broken promises I had kept alive. My throat tightened, but I held the line steady. I said slowly, I saw what happened. My voice was quiet, deliberate. I'm not coming. A sharp intake of breath from her end. But she needs you. She can't. I know what she needs, I interrupted gently. And this time, she doesn't need me. She needs to face the consequences herself. I won't fix it for her. The line went silent, my mother's breathing the only sound, hitching and uneven. I could almost hear the calculations behind her thoughts, the familiar push of guilt and responsibility she had used on me countless times before. But this time, that lever held no weight. I had built walls around my life, careful and deliberate. No one, not even her, could override them now. I hung up, letting the line click dead in my hand. The phone sat heavy on the counter, face down, the glow of the screen fading. I leaned against the window, watching the streets of Seattle below, the distant sound of traffic and construction filling the space between my thoughts. The mountains framed the horizon, muted under a gray sky, indifferent witnesses to the unfolding chaos in my family. For the first time in decades, I felt no compulsion to move, to intervene, to repair what wasn't mine to fix. My pulse slowed gradually, the adrenaline ebbing away. I poured myself another cup of coffee, the steam rising in thin, curling threads. The city stretched below me, unaware, normal, unbroken, and I realized, with a strange mixture of relief and resolve, that the fractures I had always tried to mend, my family, my sister, their choices, were no longer my responsibility. The notifications kept coming, messages from friends and distant relatives, shocked at what they had seen. But I didn't read them. I let them sit. My mind traced the events from start to finish, the wedding photos I hadn't been invited to, the weeks of orchestrated appearances, the painstaking work to keep everything together, and now this video, evidence of a disaster I would no longer intervene in. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of a passing car. I sat back in my chair, letting the realization sink in. I wouldn't be the fixer this time. I wouldn't absorb someone else's chaos to keep the world appearing orderly. I let that truth settle around me, heavy but grounding. I picked up my phone once, glanced at it, and set it down again, face down, deliberately silent. The video of Chloe's wedding would exist without my interference. Ryan's violence would unfold without my hand softening the edges, and Chloe would face the consequences, like everyone else. I could feel the weight of 35 years of responsibility loosening, a quiet liberation threading through my veins. For the first time, I was untethered from the obligation to repair everything. I poured myself a final sip of coffee, letting the warmth seep into me as the city continued below, oblivious, normal, moving forward. And I sat there, still, the phone face down, the events of the morning etched in memory but not in action. For once, I let them unfold without me, watching from a distance, finally accepting that some things were not mine to mend. The next morning, I was in my kitchen finishing a cup of coffee when there was a sharp knock at the door. I frowned, glancing at the clock, earlier than anyone usually visited. Through the peephole, I saw my father, soaked from the sudden downpour outside, standing with his coat plastered against his frame. Water ran down his silver-streaked hair and dripped from his collar. His posture seemed smaller somehow, diminished, as if the rain had stripped away some invisible shield. I opened the door cautiously. "I need to talk," he said, voice barely audible over the rain. I stepped aside, letting him in, warning him, "You have 10 minutes, and it better not be about Chloe." He shook his head and took off his wet jacket, water pooling at his feet. He held a thick manila envelope clutched tightly in his hands. "It's worse than you think," he said quietly, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. My heart sank, the cold chill of the envelope somehow seeping into my chest. I led him to the kitchen, gesturing for him to sit while I filled the electric kettle. Some conversations demand a hot drink, and my hands trembled slightly as I retrieved 2 mugs. He remained silent, wetness dripping from his sleeves, waiting for me to initiate. "This is about the house," he began, voice cracking slightly. "The bank, they're threatening foreclosure." My hand froze midair, the word hitting me like a punch. Foreclosure? My parents had owned that house for decades. Part of me wanted to walk away, let him stand there in the rain and feel the sting of abandonment. But seeing him so diminished, the familiar pull of responsibility softened the edges of my anger. I took a deep breath and unlocked the door wider, gesturing him inside. 10 minutes. Make it quick. He shuffled in, dripping water onto the hardwood floor, shaking his head. "It's about the money you sent over the past 4 years, he said, sliding the manila envelope toward me. My fingers trembled as I opened it, spreading the contents across the counter: loan documents, bank statements, notices of pending foreclosure. My eyes caught the loan amount, $195,000. "You took out a home equity line of credit?" I asked slowly, piecing together the puzzle. He nodded, staring down at his hands. "It was for Chloe. After Eric left, the kids needed stability." I scanned the documents, my blood running cold as I noticed co-signers listed: Chloe and her husband. My voice was distant when I said, "The money I sent was for that, not the mortgage?" He avoided my gaze. Understanding crashed over me. The $1,100 monthly payments I had sent faithfully for 4 years, $82,000 in total, had gone toward covering a loan, not the original mortgage. I grabbed a calculator and punched in the numbers mechanically. 4 years, 12 months, $1,100 each month. The total confirmed my fear, $82,000. I slammed my palm against the counter, spilling the tea I had poured in my moment of shock. My father's silence said everything. "Where did it all go?" I demanded. He swallowed hard. "Chloe's debts, legal fees, the down payment on her new house. Travis had conditions about where they could live." I let out a bitter laugh. Travis, the man who had caused so much harm, benefited from my money. I moved to my office, retrieving my phone and digital camera. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Documenting the fraud," I replied, my hand steady now. Every document, every forged signature, every false statement had to be preserved. "You can't." I looked at him directly. "I absolutely can, and I will. This isn't about revenge, it's about truth." My camera clicked repeatedly, capturing the undeniable evidence of misappropriated funds and falsified bank information. He flinched as I continued, but I remained calm, a stark contrast to the fury that had initially surged through me. "You meant every bit of this, and you just didn't expect to get caught," I said. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my colleague, had texted with bank contact information, ready for the next steps. I asked about the remaining balance on the HELOC. "About 70,000, he murmured, rubbing his face with both hands. "The foreclosure notice came yesterday. They're calling the full amount due." I resumed photographing, documenting every signature and piece of correspondence. The weight of what had been hidden for so long settled in the room like dust, and my father seemed to shrink further under its gravity. I asked finally, "Why tell me now, after all these years?" He swallowed, voice low. "Your mother thought we could refinance, but no bank will touch us after everything with the wedding fiasco. I couldn't live with it anymore, not after you were excluded, not after everything. The kettle whistled again, but I didn't reach for it. My hands were steady, my mind clear. For the first time, I understood that I wasn't obligated to fix anyone else's mistakes. I could witness the truth, document it, and step back. The realization was liberating, even amidst the storm outside, both literal and metaphorical. The following weekend, I arranged for my parents, Chloe, and Aunt Linda to come over to my house in Seattle. I had spent the morning organizing the documents, photographs, and bank statements across the dining table. Everything laid out systematically, nothing hidden, every detail exposed. The house felt heavier than usual, anticipation hanging in the air as I waited for them to arrive. I could hear the soft patter of rain against the windows, a quiet counterpoint to the tension that had settled in my chest. When my parents walked in, they looked tired and wary, as if they knew something was about to be revealed but didn't fully understand the scope. Chloe followed, her expression a careful mask of composure, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the papers on the table. Aunt Linda, calm as always, carried herself with that quiet steadiness I had always relied on in moments of family turmoil. I gestured toward the chairs, but I stayed standing, my gaze sweeping the room and settling on each person for a moment before I began. "This is everything," I said, my voice measured. "Every bank transfer I made over the last 4 years, every document connected to the house, the helic, and the payments." I pushed the first stack of papers toward my mother. She glanced down quickly, her lips tightening. My father leaned forward, hands folded, a hesitant acknowledgement of what was coming. Chloe stiffened when she saw her name on the documents, and Aunt Linda tilted her head slightly, observing silently. I continued, not letting anyone interrupt. "This isn't about punishment," I said firmly, "and it's not about revenge. This is about clarity, about seeing exactly what happened and understanding the consequences of the choices made." I paused to let the words sink in, watching reactions carefully. My mother's shoulders slumped slightly, my father's gaze dropped to the table, Chloe's face paled, and Aunt Linda remained quiet, as if weighing every angle. The air seemed charged with years of unspoken truths finally coming to light. I spread out photographs taken at the bank, images of my mother depositing my checks directly into the helic account, and documents showing Chloe's signature as a co-signer under false pretenses. "These are the facts," I said, tapping each piece with a steady hand. "For years of my money went here. Every transfer I made was meant for the mortgage, not this loan. This is not what I agreed to." My father's hand went to his face, rubbing the bridge of his nose, while my mother's eyes darted to Chloe, searching for reassurance or perhaps an excuse. Chloe's hands trembled as she reached for one of the statements. "No excuses," I said, holding her gaze firmly. "You all need to see what this looks like from my perspective. This is the weight I carried without knowledge, the reality I had no part in creating but was still expected to manage." I paused and let the room absorb the gravity of what I had laid before them. Aunt Linda finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "This is serious. You all need to decide how to make this right." My father looked up, his voice rough and low. "If it's necessary, we can sell part of the side lot. It could cover some of the payments, repair the damage, make restitution where we can." I nodded, acknowledging his offer, but I added a condition. "I'm not interested in punishment or revenge. I want truth, acknowledgement, and the peace of knowing this ends here. No one should manipulate or deceive again, and no one should expect me to fix what is not mine to repair." My mother shifted uncomfortably, fidgeting with her hands, while Chloe's eyes brimmed with unspoken guilt. Aunt Linda placed a hand on her own notebook, ready to document what needed to happen. I continued methodically, walking them through the account statements, the helic documentation, and the timeline of transfers. There was no anger in my voice now, only a precise clarity that left no room for argument. Everyone watched, taking in each detail, seeing for the first time the full impact of their decisions. When the conversation concluded, my father leaned back, exhaustion and relief etched into his posture. My mother remained quiet, as though absorbing the weight of accountability, and Chloe lowered her gaze, visibly shaken. Aunt Linda scribbled final notes, ensuring that everything had been documented correctly. I felt a strange sense of closure settle in the room. For the first time in years, everyone confronted the reality without deflection or distraction. The consequences were visible, undeniable, and the path forward, while not perfect, was honest. By the time everyone left, the rain had stopped, leaving a damp, clean air in its wake. I stayed in the living room for a while, moving the documents back into folders and stacking them neatly on the sideboard. There was no celebration, no hugs, no declarations of forgiveness, just the quiet knowledge that the truth had been spoken and received. I felt an unfamiliar lightness, a release from the obligation of being the family fixer, the one who bore the hidden burdens of others. The first step toward my own peace had been taken, and the weight of unearned responsibility began to lift. The transaction was finalized, and a sense of closure settled in me that I had not expected. For years, I had carried the weight of my family's missteps, stepping in to fix what others broke, trying to patch over mistakes that were never mine to solve. Now, as I sifted through the final documents and the certified check lay neatly in front of me, I felt a profound shift, a release from the constant pressure that had shaped my adult life. The money, though not enough to recover everything I had lost, symbolized a boundary I had finally drawn. It wasn't about wealth or repayment, it was about reclaiming control over my own life. Chloe, standing awkwardly across from me, watched as I arranged the papers with deliberate care. Her usual charm seemed subdued, replaced with a tension I hadn't seen in her before. I'll make it right, she said quietly. I studied her, taking in the effort in her eyes to own her mistakes. There was no dramatic outburst, no pleading, only a small acknowledgement of her responsibility. For once, I didn't feel the need to intervene. I didn't have to soothe, explain, or rescue. The situation belonged to her now, just as the consequences did. My parents remained nearby, their faces lined with a mixture of shame and relief. They had agreed to the arrangements, signing the transfer of the side lot and other necessary paperwork to resolve the outstanding debts. The act itself was simple on paper, but the gravity of it had been heavy for decades. I kept my tone neutral, my movements precise, unwilling to let emotion override the clarity I had fought so hard to maintain. This was not about confrontation or revenge, it was about finality and truth. Aunt Linda hovered quietly, offering support without commentary, her presence a reminder that someone in the family could witness this without complicating it. Her calm, unjudging attention was a quiet anchor, and I realized how critical it had been to have at least one person outside of the chaos who understood what responsibility and integrity meant. I acknowledged her with a small nod, grateful for the steadiness she brought into the room. As the paperwork concluded, I folded the documents neatly and slipped them into my briefcase. Chloe lingered a moment longer, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. I met her gaze and gave a slight incline of my head. There was no need for more words. This was the boundary I had set, clear and unyielding. She would handle her part, I would handle mine, and our lives could finally proceed separately but honestly. Driving home afterward, the Seattle streets glimmered from the morning drizzle, each reflection in the puddles and wet asphalt a mirrored reminder of clarity. For the first time in decades, I felt unburdened, not the usual temporary relief after helping someone else, but a deep, sustained sense of release. The home I had restored over the past year greeted me with its familiar warmth and solidity. The hardwood floors, freshly sanded counters, and open spaces were no longer just physical restorations, they represented a life rebuilt on my own terms. I placed the check into my wallet, not for spending, but as a tangible token of autonomy. It was proof that I could enforce boundaries, uphold fairness, and navigate consequences without surrendering my peace. The money was not a prize or a victory, it was a marker of agency, of living life without the invisible leash of others' crises. The quiet that followed in my home was unlike any I had ever known. It was free of expectation, obligation, or guilt. I poured myself a cup of tea, settled into my favorite chair, and let the silence wash over me, a soft affirmation that I had arrived at the point I had long denied myself, living solely for my own life. Later, I noticed a message from Chloe, brief but sincere. "Thank you for letting me make things right. The kids miss you." I sat with it for a moment, absorbing the calmness it brought instead of tension or resentment. My response was deliberate, measured. "I'm free Saturday afternoon if you want to bring them by." I added a boundary without apology, time limited, my terms clear. Her reply confirmed a recognition of limits, just her. First, a conversation necessary for understanding, nothing more. The days that followed felt lighter. The sale of the side lot finalized, funds deposited into accounts for Chloe's children. I began the routine of my own life without intrusion. Every morning, as light poured through the kitchen windows, I traced the smooth surface of the oak counter I had restored, feeling the subtle imperfections that made it whole. I realized that the true restoration was not just the physical space, but the reclamation of my boundaries, my agency, and my freedom. The soft, enduring quiet of the house affirmed what I had fought for, the ability to live without carrying others' burdens, to find peace in my own life, and to finally understand that the only life I was responsible for was my own. Rain taps softly against the kitchen windows as I sit at my island, a steaming mug of tea cradled in my hands. My phone buzzes with a message from Chloe. I pause before opening it, anticipating old tensions and awkward justifications. The screen lights up with a simple note. "Thank you for letting me make things right. Can we meet?" My thumb hovers over the reply. I type carefully, choosing each word as if navigating a minefield. Yes, Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock. No apologies, no explanations. Just a time and a place, a boundary I am finally comfortable asserting. The morning of the meeting is quiet. I move through my Seattle home with the same measured steps I have learned to take over the past weeks. Each corner, each surface, holds the calm I have been cultivating, a stark contrast to the years spent cleaning up other people's messes. The oak countertop glows faintly in the daylight, reminding me that restoration is more than a skill, it is a metaphor. I make tea, place 2 mugs on the island, and sit, listening to the soft hum of the city beyond my windows. Chloe arrives right at 2, pulling her car into the driveway. Her small sedan has a dented passenger side and a missing hubcap, signs of the practical life she now leads without the luxury she once wielded like armor. She steps onto the porch, a wooden box clutched tightly in her hands, knuckles pale. Her hair falls straight and natural, a deliberate move away from the artificiality that marked her past appearances. I step aside to let her in. "You look different," I say, my voice even, noting the subtle changes without judgment. We settle at the kitchen island. No wine, no soft distractions, just 2 adults, quietly acknowledging the years that have passed and the mistakes that linger. The box is placed between us. I lift the lid slowly. Inside rests our grandfather's pocket watch, tarnished but still solid, the weight of it tangible in my hands. My chest tightens slightly, remembering the stories of its significance, the moments when its presence was more symbol than material. Chloe watches silently as I wind the watch and listen to the mechanism click into life. "Maybe time doesn't erase mistakes," I say, turning it over in my hands, "but it teaches you when to stop repeating them." The room is still. Rain continues its steady percussion against the windows, a private soundtrack to our tentative reconciliation. Chloe's voice finally breaks the quiet. "What did you do with the money from the land sale?" Her question is careful, hesitant, and I meet her gaze fully. "I didn't keep it. I opened accounts for Emma and Lucas, college funds." Her eyes widen as the truth lands. There is no accusation in my voice, no bitterness, just factual clarity, the kind I have cultivated over weeks of confrontation, documentation, and careful decision-making. We sit together in silence, each absorbed in the weight of what has changed. Chloe's children, her responsibility, the realities of her actions, they all rest between us without need for argument or judgment. The wooden box, the watch, the proof of boundaries maintained, all serve as symbols of the lessons learned. She nods, understanding the limits I have set and the boundaries I intend to keep. No hugs are exchanged. No promises of family holidays or shared vacations are made. There is nothing performative in this meeting. Instead, a subtle shift occurs, like a hinge finally oiled, a door that opens without resistance. Years of expectation and resentment are acknowledged and set aside. Chloe is learning to stand on her own, and I am finally free of the responsibility I once felt for everyone else's mistakes. The hour passes with quiet conversation, focused on the present, not the past. Chloe leaves the wooden box on the counter, a gesture of trust and acknowledgement. I watch her walk to her car, rain-soaked but steady, 3 jobs and a new life evident in every step. I do not follow her out. I remain in my home, grounded in the certainty of my choices and the boundaries I have maintained. The door closes softly behind her, leaving only the quiet hum of the city and the gentle tap of rain. I return to the island, sit with my journal, and write the entry that has been forming in my mind for weeks. The softest revenge is peace and quiet. There is no lingering anger, no desire to punish, just calm, deliberate clarity. For the first time in decades, I am not fixing anyone else. The life I have restored is my own, intact and resolute. I sit there, watching the sky lighten as the rain tapers off, reflecting on the distance traveled, the conflicts faced, and the lessons learned. My hands rest on the oak countertop, fingers tracing the smooth surface, recalling the splinters that once marked it as unfinished, dangerous. The restoration is complete, the home, and my mind, finally in order. The window offers a view of the distant mountains, a steady reminder that the world continues, resilient and patient, much like I have learned to be. The watch ticks steadily in my hand. Chloe's children will have a chance. Chloe will rebuild herself within her own limits. And I, finally, am free. My journal closes softly. Tea cools beside me, the rain fading into the quiet of an afternoon that belongs only to me. For the first time in 35 years, I have no one else to fix. My life, my boundaries, and my peace are intact, and the softest, most complete form of revenge has arrived: serenity.